Alright, so the Tiburon is back, doing surprisingly well. Everything's running good with the car, and it's funny because all my camera equipment is just not running at all and like malfunctioning like crazy. So literally the Tiburon is the only thing that's like thriving right now. So for this one, I thought it would be fun to go over everything maintenance-wise that I've done to the car at kilometer intervals or each year I've had it. I mentioned in one video before that I keep all the receipts for this car, and the previous owner did, but what I didn't mention is the fact that I have all of it in a gigantic book. The previous owner of this car serviced it solely at the dealership. Basically, I looked through all of the records from the previous owner and mine to see exactly what was done when, and I think that might be helpful for people to know like what should have been done to this car before they bought it, and also what mileage you're buying it at, what you can kind of expect is going to go based off of what I have replaced. So yeah, I have all records of this car right from when she bought it at the dealership back in 2009. And I'm gonna kind of leave out the oil changes and tire changes. It kind of goes without saying that you should change the oil every 5K. Forget what that is in miles, probably like 3,000 miles or something like that. So I'm just gonna leave that out of it completely. Kind of more of the bigger things that happened to this car. I think the first thing that came up for this car was the brake servicing and replacing brakes. I think around like 36,000 kilometers she started servicing them. So in 2013, at around probably 50 or 60K, I think it was, the car died and she had to get a new battery. Common theme, it happened a couple times to her and a couple times to me, but lately the car has been perfect. I haven't replaced that battery in years. In 2014 was also the first time the spark plugs were changed and the first recall for the car, I think for the stoplight switch. Then end of 2014, around, I think it was 70,000 kilometers, the car started hesitating when it starts, and it still does that to this day. Lately, it's been pretty good. I have no idea what it is. I cleaned the MAF sensor. I did a lot of fuel cleanings. I mean, it could be the injectors. Around 80K, she had the brakes inspected again, and I saw the charge was like $200 just for them to inspect them. I don't even think they did any work. So then in 2015, at 90K, she did a brake service and also a brake fluid flush. And then at a whopping 106K, that's in kilometers by the way, is when the timing belt was done. I think at the exact same time as the timing belt, they also did the spark plugs and accessory belts. Usually I would recommend anyone doing a timing belt change with these to do it just before it tells you to, which is every 100K or every, I think it's like 60K miles. Just because the timing belts love to snap early, it's just definitely better to err on the safe side and not go over that at all. And then I bought the car in 2017 at 121K kilometers. And I think the last work that she did was a brake service, the pads and rotors, which is nice that she did that before giving it to me. Oh yeah, I forgot, it actually goes even further than that. She also had to replace the front right axle, an alignment of course, and also power steering leak. Thank you to the girl for not leaving that up to me. But, you know, yeah, luckily the car was pretty taken care of already, so I had a good couple years without anything going kind of crazy. I also did rust proof it, and I think over the time I've had it, I've rust proofed it 4 times, but that's a Canadian thing, so. Or if you're in a rust belt, you'll probably know about that, but good thing to do. One of the first things I did too was take it to the dealership because I noticed immediately once I got it, it was kind of hesitating to start, which was kind of funny to track back that she also had the same issues. So from 121K to around 150K, I really didn't have to do much. I did my oil changes, I did my tire stuff, but also around 140, 150, I started doing engine oil treatments with oil changes and also a fuel system clean. Around 160,000 kilometers is when things kind of started getting a little messy, so the battery died. And then not long after that, I had to do I think it was the rear pads and rotors went first. And then only 7K after that, at 167,000, is when I had to replace the spark plugs again. I think at that time I was starting to get some colored smoke out of the exhaust, and then it turned out to be the spark plugs pretty on their way out. So I got some NGK ones at the time, and I've had them ever since. Then again, more kind of regular stuff, nothing else too bad happened, but at 190K, so I did it early, got the timing belt and water pump done. And then 5 kilometers later at 195K, I did the brake fluid flush and a transmission drain and fill. And just before 200K at 199 is when the sway bar bushings went. 205K, I think it was front pads and rotors that needed to be done. And this one seized at some point. I think I had it serviced. At 213 kilometers, I had the throttle body serviced. They get kind of buildup of carbon in them and they don't work as well, so I had that serviced and cleaned. And then once again, my battery died. I think I killed it myself. Like I left a light on, or I did something wrong and I killed that battery specifically, I think. Now that we're in the 200s, this is when often I've had to replace things. So 1,000 kilometers later, I think it was at 214 or something, I started having oil filter issues for some reason. They always kept leaking. The thing that was leaking was the fuel pressure switch. So that was replaced. And then literally another 1,000 kilometers after that. So this is kind of where people get a little frustrated with the car, is when things like this happen, like month after month after month. Kind of just the way of an old car. Once you get to 200K, oftentimes that's when like everything starts to go. So yeah, 1,000 kilometers after that, my AC compressor died. And then the funny thing about that is it died one summer and I had it replaced. And then I took the car out the next season and it was broken again. So I had to replace it twice. But luckily the first one was under warranty, so it was pretty obvious that the compressor failed. So I got another one, but I also had to pay for the labor to do it. 120K, so that's another 5,000 kilometers after that, the hood struts and trunk struts started to fail. It's not like a huge maintenance part. Yeah, at 222K is when I decided to replace the suspension with BC coilovers, but that was because my shocks were completely blown. Couldn't ignore it anymore, so at 220K is when I had to get all new suspension. And then 2,000 kilometers after that is when I started having trouble with the O2 sensors. I think it was bank 2. And funny enough, again, the CV axle, the same CV axle that she replaced, started leaking again at 224. So I didn't actually do it. The shop found that the boot was kind of ripped and leaking. They were like, yeah, it's not ripped that bad. And I was like, sick, I'm just not gonna do that. And now it's been a couple years and I'm pretty sure I can't ignore that anymore. So now I'm looking for CV axles. And then the next couple records, for some reason, I don't have the odometer reading for them. I just have the dates. Between then, I think it was 2 years ago now, is when I noticed the rust under the frame, front frame rail in between the catalytic converter. But yeah, that rust repair I had to take to a body shop, and I think it cost me like $1,500 to get that section kind of cut out and replaced. And I think they did it on both sides. The same year, I also needed pads and rotors. It was for the rear. That might have actually been when this rear one seized, and then I also needed pads on top of that. The sunroof was replaced 2 years ago. That started getting to the point that it was just too much rust on it, and it was kind of starting to leak through and cause a lot of issues. And I think, yeah, the seal was replaced on top of that. I did a whole video on that. That was done, and at the same time, the thermostat, I saw it leaking coolant and I was like, I don't want to mess around and find out, so I replaced that then. But yeah, that's everything that has been replaced on this car. Hopefully that helps. The trees are super stinky right now, so I'm gonna finish this off. But I feel like that's good to know, like what should have been replaced, or if it looks like the previous owner hasn't changed anything at all, that you know what's gonna start having issues. And especially when you're buying these cars, I'd say most of these are around that mileage that I bought mine, or the mileage that mine is right now. Miles, it's at 160K, but for Canadians, almost 260K kilometers. Here, that's a lot. Cars don't really survive that far here, especially these. That interior peeking through though, with the brakes, oof.